What is good, my people? What is up? What is up? If you haven't done so already, go ahead and scroll down to watch any of the missed episodes just to make sure that you are on point, of course. Now, the rest of us, we already know we're gonna jump right in. I just want to shine some light on those individuals who actually started to take the time to get into their word. Whether or not you decided to continue reading in the book of Samuel or another book, or maybe just taking a couple minutes out of the day to read and reflect the verse of the day on the Bible app. Whatever step that you took, whether it was big or small, I want you guys to acknowledge it and really just give yourself a small pat on the back for it, only because that was a big step towards spiritual growth and understanding, which now leads me on to a very important point. Please, I cannot stress this enough, but before you ever get into the word, always make sure that you are praying and asking God to not only, give you the wisdom by opening up your mind, but as well as just being your spiritual guide and, better understanding the word for yourself. Now, on to the good stuff, what you all been waiting for. Drum roll, please. Yes, we are still in the book of Samuel, but we are actually going next door to chapter 25. Get it? Because last episode we did chapter 24. Okay. Anyways, so chapter 25 just basically, welcomes readers into giving us just a public service announcement on the fact that Samuel has finally passed away and he was buried at his home in Ramah. And then the next couple of verses just pretty much introduces two new individuals that we haven't met before and just giving us a quick description of, who they are, right? So of course I'll be reading off of the NIV version. And let's just start off with verses 2 to 3. So, a certain man in Maon who had property there at Carmel was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was intelligent and a beautiful woman, but her husband was surly and mean in his dealings. He was a Calebite. So a Calebite is just basically somebody who's a descendant from Caleb. So Caleb just goes all the way back to the book of Numbers when Moses was still leading the people, to the promised land. And he was just one of those leaders that was picked from his tribe. Verse 3 already foreshadows certain actions that might be taking place by both individuals, given the characteristics that's used to describe both of them, right? So for example, Nabal, he's described as surly, which means rude, and mean in his dealings, while Abigail, she's described as intelligent and beautiful. So now, keep these characteristics in mind, because then you'll be able to understand why each person did what they did as you read throughout this chapter. That being said, David and his men are just traveling through the wilderness, and came to no surprise that after David sent 10 of his men to go speak on his behalf to Nabal, as far as asking him to be able to share any food or anything that he had with him and his men, that Nabal was very mean and rude with his response to David's men, right? So mind you, back then David worked with Nabal's servants and shepherds when it came to making sure that he looked out for them. They didn't take anything from them. He and his people treated his people good. So, that was part of what he had relayed to his men, to let him know that, just to give himself a little bit credibility that, hey, I'm not a bad guy or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can actually ask your servants themselves and they'll, attest to what I'm saying. Nabal's response was rude and mean and offensive. In verses 10 through 11, Nabal basically answered David's servants and said that, who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat that I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men who's coming from, and give it to men coming from who knows where, right? So when David's men came back and reported his response, he immediately grabbed 400 of his men. They all strapped up, ready to go slaughter everything that Nabal had in his household. Like, David was not playing. And I just want to point out the fact that, in verse 13, David didn't waste any time to think anything over, right? He reacts emotionally first, clearly offended by Nabal's words, instead of thinking everything over to then react logically instead. you know then maybe, in that moment, he would have been slow to anger, and then maybe there wouldn't have been a need for him to assume that it is in his right to take those kind of matters into his own hands. But that just goes to show you, anointed by God or not, at the end of the day, we are all still human. We all make mistakes. However, though, that's no excuse to be able to say that, okay, bet, like, because God is forgiving, he's good, he's merciful, I'm gonna use and abuse that advantage and just do whatever I want to do. I would highly suggest that you don't go about, you know, thinking like that or having that type of mindset, only because at the end of the day, like I mentioned in a previous video, God knows everything. Like, again, you could fool people around you, you could fool yourself into helping you better sleep at night, but at the end of the day, God knows our true intentions behind why we do the things that we do. He knows our hearts. So at the end of the day, you're really just shooting yourself in the foot by thinking that you can get away with that and not have consequences for your actions. At the end of the day, despite our mistakes or shortcomings, God always find a way to help us out of it. It just depends on if you let him and if you are willing to be corrected. At the end of the day, we all know that God, he doesn't, force us to do anything. We all have free will. It's either you with him or you not, right? So it's kind of like what that saying goes, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can take the horse to the water, but you can't force the horse to drink the water. It doesn't matter how hard that you try to pull and tug at the rope tied around the horse's neck. If that horse doesn't want to drink that water, the horse is not going to drink the water. So in verses 18 through 19, I'm guessing after, some of the servants, some of Nabal's servants must have overheard like this conversation that was happening between him and David's men. They immediately, went to go tell his wife Abigail everything that happened. Even in the ending of verse 17, one of the servants said that, Nabal's, he is such a wicked man that no one can even talk to him. So at this point, they knew that going to him and trying to reason with him, or, basically a test for David's words, knew it wouldn't have done any good, like going through it with him. So they had to go to somebody that they knew would be able to take action and, basically save everybody. And the only reason why I say save everybody is because, from the last episode, we learned that David was very popular and known and famous. So, he was famous for being victorious in everything that he did, in any of the wars or battles that he went out. Whenever he was going against anybody, he always was on top. Like, he always won because God was with him, right? So they already knew, like, once David's men left to go report when the boss said that David was gonna come back with some heat, like, they already know, like, David don't play that. So, once Abigail, like, heard all of this, she quickly grabbed, like, all the provisions or food that they had left, and her and her servant, like, went out to go meet up with David right before he tries to come and destroy everything and everyone back at her house. So when you read verses 23 through 31, is where you basically see Abigail was able to stop David on the road and be able to try to plead and reason with him. So throughout that whole little paragraph is, Abigail just pretty much getting on her knees and just trying to, like, convince David not to go and kill or not to go and destroy her whole household, right? And clearly she wasn't doing it for the benefit of Nabal, her husband, because in the ending of verse 25, she describes Nabal as just pretty much don't pay any attention to that wicked man Nabal. Like, he don't know what he be saying half the time. His name means, like, he is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. So in other words, don't pay him no mind. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm here on the behalf of just, trying to make peace with you into not doing something that you're gonna end up regretting. And that is confirmed in verse 31 when she says that my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or having avenged himself. So she already knew that, or that was the Holy Spirit speaking through her as well too, that you don't want to go and do this, because you doing this before you're even like officially king of Israel is just going to be unneeded blood on your hands. Because of her good judgment, as David stated in verse 33, right? For keeping me from bloodshed this day, God was able to use Abigail to intervene and save David from having not only a guilty conscience, but unneeded blood on his hands. So because of God's favor for us, right? He's able to use others along the way to guide and lead us in a direction that's better than our own judgments. And even after, verse 38, so after she was able to make peace with David, David didn't go and destroy any of her household or people in it anymore. Verse 38 states that about 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal and he died. That right there, you know, that right there demonstrates firsthand on the importance of just leaving things in situations that are either too big or too hard for us to handle, and just letting God take control in his own way. Why get your hands dirty when God is clearly saying that he want to handle your lightweight? So there's no need for revenge when God's verdict will always be the best, even when we can't understand that yet. Once it's all said and done, we want to follow David's lead and just remember to praise and thank God. I feel like a lot of times that is like just one of the big steps that we forget towards the end, when we finally like just get the blessings that we've been asking for, whether it's, landing a great book deal, or, just probably working hard for that position or title that we've been wanting, or, maybe just a bidding war for this dream house that you just had your eyes on for the longest, on the market, whatever that is, whatever that blessing is for you. At the end of the day, always remember to just thank God, because, yes, he's good. Yes, he's merciful. Yes, he's kind, but, thanking him also demonstrates that he is a mastermind creator, very just pays very attention to just the smallest things and details in our lives that we probably don't think he's stressed or worried about. He's 10 steps ahead and trying to intervene in whatever way possible to be able to make sure that you don't go. Hopefully you guys are able to take some gems with you home, and towards the ending of this video, I'll be leaving just a little something for you guys to reflect and meditate on, in hopes that it flourishes or manifests its way in your life one day. But as always, you guys stay blessed.